All right, good evening, everyone. It is my great privilege to welcome you to tonight's featured homecoming event. My name is Kendall Lucas, and I have the honor of serving as the Director of Alumni Relations here at PLNU. But before I forget, at the end of tonight's formal presentation, we'll have a chance to answer a few questions from our viewers tonight. So if you have a question for Dean or Destin, please use the chat function to send a message to myself, Kendall Lucas, and we'll get to some of your questions at the end. I can vividly remember the moment that word spread amongst the student body in 2019 that a PLNU alum had directed the highly anticipated film Just Mercy. Never have I received more emails or drop-ins from students asking the question, how do we get Destin Daniel Cretton here on campus? Destin is an award-winning filmmaker known for his films I Am Not a Hipster, Short Term 12, The Glass Castle, Just Mercy, and most recently, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. But the reason we are happy he's here with us tonight is not just because of these outstanding accolades, although we're very proud, but because he is a 2001 PLNU alumnus who cares deeply about storytelling and the impact it has on a community. I'm also honored to have with us today Dr. Dean Nelson. Dean is the Vice Chair of the Department of Literature, Journalism, Writing and Languages, as well as the Director of the Journalism Program here at PLNU. Dean is also an accomplished author, writing for publications such as the New York Times, Boston Globe, Christianity Today, and several other national publications, as well as authoring his own books as well. Dean and Destin, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Dean, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Kendall, and welcome everybody. Good to see some of you in these very tiny screens, but this is kind of fun, and it's really fun getting to talk to you, Destin. You and I have crossed paths a few times since you graduated, but it's just cool getting to hang out with you in this way. So welcome back to Point Loma, Destin.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here. It was really cool to what music was that was playing? But I was cruising through everybody's little videos, and some people are just lounging in their living rooms with blankets on them. Seems very nice.
Yeah, welcome to online teaching too. You never know what you're going to do when you ask the students to turn on their screens. I hope it's a little more private this time. But first of all, where are you? I mean, when I've been in contact with you over the last few months, you've been in Australia, you've been in LA, you've been in Maui. So where are you right now?
I am on Maui. I'm talking to you from my grandparents' house where I grew up, here in Pukalani. Where here's a picture of my mom when she was young.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she was
awesome. So are you in the room that you grew up in?
I'm in the room that I used to sleep in a lot when I was a kid.
Unbelievable.
I used to be up at my grandma's house all the time.
And so you're in Maui at this house, but you've turned it into kind of an editing place, right? Aren't you doing the editing for your Marvel Comics movie there?
Yeah, I'm actually working out of here because the internet sucks at my mom's house. So we had to go and get it. I mean, this is like an old plantation house, but we went down and retrofitted it with screens and everything that I need to edit this Marvel movie.
I think that's kind of hilarious that here you are, this major motion picture, and you're saying, yeah, the internet sucks at this place. I gotta get it fixed. Don't you have people who do this for you?
My assistant, who is my cousin Ami, she's been helping me quite a bit while we've been here on Maui. So she was the one who had to go and get the TV and everything.
Well, good job, Ami. Hey, Destin, I went back and I rewatched a bunch of your movies that you made when you were a Point Loma student. So I watched.
Oh, really?
yeah, Bartholomew's Song, Long Branch,
Wow.
Grocery Store, Guinea Pig, Deacon's Mondays, and I'm Not a Hipster. Did I miss?
Wow. No, that's the list. That's crazy.
Okay, well, okay, so when you were making those, and this is an honest question, were you thinking these are steps to get me to my aspiration to be a Hollywood director, or were you just trying to fulfill a class assignment?
100% not steps to fulfilling my dream of being a Hollywood director. All I knew at that time was, and I think all my brain could handle was what was right in front of me. And honestly, each project felt like almost impossible to me in its own. Just what will I be able to finish this short film was all that my brain could handle. It was never, this is a stepping stone to something else. All I knew was that I loved the practice of telling stories and shooting them on film and gathering my friends together to do it together and present that to an audience. I just really loved that process, and so that's as far as my brain could think.
At what point did the aspiration of becoming a Hollywood director hit you then?
The aspiration, I mean,
was there a moment where you just said, here's what I want to do, here's where I'm headed?
Honestly, like I am a fairly insecure person, so it's hard for me to have ever admitted that to myself until it was actually happening.
Oh, sure.
That doesn't mean that I wasn't actively and obsessively going after this, the practice of making movies. But I did learn early on that for myself and my own psychology, thinking that, you know, at some point right around the corner, a Hollywood producer is going to knock on my door and offer me my first big break. Thinking like that was actually not healthy for me. It was almost paralyzing. So I kind of had to rewire my brain to constantly remind myself why I am doing this, and doing the movies that I'm doing right now can't even still, it can't be my ultimate goal, because if all of this is taken away, I should still be able to find personal fulfillment in exploring stories.
Yeah. Okay. I love that answer. But I also love the answer of doing things with your friends, like at Point Loma, when I kept seeing people coming up, you know, on the screen or in the credits, my son being one of them. And it was just cool. It just sounded like you must have, on the one hand, yes, it looked impossible to do, but to get together with your buddies and pull this thing off, it must have been great fun also, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun. I always get like I always really get in my head before every project from the very beginning. I remember before Long Branch, I was having panic attacks before we started shooting, and but as soon as everybody's together and everybody and the whole team is working together to tell a story, there's honestly very few things in my life that are as fulfilling as that process.
Yeah, that's very cool. You know, I'm also thinking about when you first came to Point Loma, you had never visited the campus. In fact, as I recall, you had only once or twice even been on the mainland of the U.S. So was Point Loma's campus and where you grew up in that house that you're in Maui, no adjustment period at all, right? You just fit right and never missed a stride, right?
We, no, not at all. We flew into LAX, and Kaipo Thomas, who also flew, he was my roommate there at Point Loma. We both flew from Maui, and we packed this giant, like a huge tub full of, like, we didn't know that we were even going to be fed when we got there. So we packed tons of top ramen in this tub. And I had like an old wetsuit that I found under someone's garage, and it had holes in it. And I was like, oh, I need a wetsuit. It was just like, we had never packed for anything before. We landed at nighttime and got picked up in the Point Loma van by somebody, I'm spacing on their name, and we drove down at night. And so I was staring out that window at lights and all the, trying to picture what things were like. And it wasn't until the next morning that I woke up and in Hendricks and looked out at that ocean, and it was just, it was a mind explosion. And it really, there were a lot of things I didn't really know about myself. I didn't know that growing up in Hawaii gave you an accent. I didn't really know that until, the fifth time someone was like, huh. And there definitely was a big cultural shock for a lot of us Hawaii kids that came over. Wow.
Well, I'm still kind of stuck on the thought that you didn't know you were going to be fed when you got here. That we should put that people could pack their own food if they wanted to. That might be something for the admissions people to consider.
It was like, I remember when we first found out that we could go into that cafeteria and eat as much as we wanted to. It was like, it was so mind blowing. I used to hoard food and, put things in my pocket, but
you figured it out. So I'm remembering, we had a couple of classes together, and I'm remembering in a creative writing class in particular, you'd write these stories where a main character was always in just kind of a really awkward situation. And the story, the story was never really that much more complicated than this person was just having a hard time adjusting. And now, as I've heard you talk in the past about the adjustments that you had to make coming to Point Loma, those stories were really coming out of your own experience, weren't they?
Yeah, I suppose so, subconsciously. A lot of things I don't really realize what I'm doing until I'm looking back at it. But yeah, it honestly wasn't until I was much more adjusted that, looking back, I realized how uncomfortable I was in the first, couple years there.
Yeah. Well, and then you had a story, as I recall, published in The Point, and that pretty much launched your career, wouldn't you say? You got published, you got a byline.
Yeah, that was it for me.
I'm kind of connecting dots here, but am I right?
Yeah. I will say that taking classes like yours, and this is not a plug for Point Loma, but for my brain, I needed to be exposed to the world in layers, because I tried going up to LA for a semester, and I got pretty depressed and full of anxiety. It was just too much for me to go from an island to LA life. So having a place like Point Loma, where I had professors like you who who are opening my brain to things that are, you know, sometimes uncomfortable and scary, realities of the world that I never really thought about, but doing that in a safe environment like Point Loma was really what I needed. And I don't think that I would be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for that experience.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Well, thanks. I just remember you as a student. I thought, well, this guy can write. I know this guy can write. He can tell some really interesting stories, but they all had that same they all had that same theme of this awkward guy. But all right, moving on. So
I don't even remember those stories, but I'm glad you do.
yeah, I wish I would have saved them. But you know, so many things that people write for my classes are forgettable. Anyway, you tell people stories though, Destin. So many of the main characters risk a lot. They get really vulnerable. They're not always the big bombastic heroes. And, you know, obviously I'm thinking of Short Term 12 and Glass Castle and Just Mercy in particular. What draws you to those stories of these characters who just have to be so vulnerable and risk so much?
Every project that I've worked on, I especially features, because I work on them for 1 and 2 years. I'm always looking for something that I deeply identify with in the characters, in a way that allows me to benefit from watching them go through whatever they're going through in the story, and it helps me to process through my own vulnerabilities or insecurities or anxieties, to watch a character go through something that I relate to. I mean, the other thing that I just feel like, because it's also not a conscious thing, but looking back, I feel like I'm drawn to stories about people who are forgotten or on the outside, or kind of looked down on by society, and watching them figure out how to make sense of the world despite that, and find self-worth despite that. Those are the types of stories that I seem to be drawn to.
Yeah, and you've even said in the past that you pick stories that also have this dimension of, will telling this story help make me a better person? Which I find that to be a fascinating criterion, as opposed to, will this movie that I'm making, will this story that I'm telling help me get to the next level and make more money perhaps, or get more prestige perhaps, or influence? But you're drawn to telling stories that are going to make you a better person. I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, it's like a weirdly selfish way to choose what the projects I'm working on, but
I don't think it's selfish at all. I think if you're going to invest that much of your life into a story, you want it to actually be something that enhances you as opposed to depletes you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I struggle with wanting to please people, and I have to constantly remind myself of that in order to try to make things that are truthful and grounded and not trying to please. And when I repeatedly find that whenever I'm trying to impress or be the person that I think someone wants me to be, or pitch the idea that I think somebody wants to hear, it's the product is bad because it's not truthful to me. And so choosing defining like my criteria as something that will hopefully make me a better person, either through what I'm learning, through the new culture or experience that I'm exposing myself to through the story. It helps me to come at each project from a more grounded, authentic way that is true to myself and not trying to impress studios or whoever I happen to be working for.
Yeah, I think part of that humility that comes through from what you just said also gets reflected in sometimes where you've said that you're always surprised that you get to be the one who tells these stories. I mean, you've told some really powerful stories through film, and you just seem surprised that you're the one who gets to tell it. I think that humility is really, I don't know, I'm assuming it's rare, but I sure think it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it humility / insecurity /
All right, you can call it insecurity. I'll call it humility.
But I do feel very, very surprised and grateful every time I am able to do a story and get paid to do a story and be able to support my family while exploring a story that I would gladly have paid to explore. And so and in particular for stories like Jeanette Walls and Brian Stevenson, when these are people who I deeply respect on so many levels, and who have allowed me to sit in their personal life and their in Brian's case and his clients' lives, and allowed me to experience their story through their eyes and tap into that on a very intimate level. Yes, I'm very surprised and so grateful that they allowed me to be that person, and I have, I've grown so much through telling stories like that.
You know, I think the Brian Stevenson Just Mercy story, that had to stretch you a little bit, because as I recall, you went to Alabama to museums and to historical sites, where the slave trade occurred, or different injustices occurred. And you even went out and picked cotton. Is that right?
It was the first time that I visited Alabama was to go to the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, and I met up with Brian Stevenson there and saw the offices right in the center of the city, where his 100 or so staff members and lawyers are all working on different death row cases. And Brian took me, I hopped in his very humble car. I think he was driving like a Honda Civic with like a cracked windshield. This was like 6 months after he did that TED Talk and left with $1 million of donations. But all of that goes straight into his nonprofit. And he drove me down to Monroeville, where a lot of Just Mercy in that case takes place, and walked me out into a cotton field and very graciously and gently told me to see what it feels like to pick cotton. And he said he does this every time he comes down there. He'll do it to remind him of what he's fighting for. And it is surprising just to do that and realize how thorny those bushes are and what that experience would have been like, to be doing that for generations. And yeah, the repercussions of slavery and the way that we have treated this particular group of people, the repercussions and the ripple effect that has happened over the years to where we are now just became so clear and heavy. It was a very, very heavy experience, and it sounds like a depressing experience, but it was so enlightening and actually so hopeful to be around a group of people who are vibrantly working every day for people who have no one else, like literally have no other hope except will somebody from EJI call me today and tell me they're going to help.
Wow.
So it was a very inspiring experience.
Yeah. Both Brian Stevenson and Jeanette Walls of Glass Castle, both said similar things about you, where they said that you captured their heart. And that's what gave them the confidence that you would be the director. And I didn't tell you that I did this, but I called Jeanette Walls recently just to talk about you. And she said that one of the reasons that Hollywood loves you is that, and this is a direct quote from Jeanette Walls, she said, "Fear is contagious, but so is kindness. And working with you was one of the best experiences of her life." That's pretty high praise, man. A number of people wanted to make Glass Castle into a movie, but you were the only one who was able to do it. And she says it's just because of the spirit and the tone that you set in making that movie. She said you never lost your temper. The set always radiated your kindness and your wisdom. That's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah, that is very, very nice of Jeanette. It's very nice.
Well, I mean, my stereotype of Hollywood directors, and granted, I don't know anything, but that they're these kind of hardened, cynical, competitive, do anything to succeed kind of folks. And you're not giving me that vibe, and you didn't give Jeanette that vibe or Brian Stevenson that vibe. So way to go.
Thank you. I mean, I do think that I remember when I was at Point Loma and I was thinking of what it would be like to work in this industry, and it terrified me because of exactly that, what I thought directors needed to be like or producers needed to be like. The same is true really for most industries, that you feel like you have to put on a certain act in order to be cutthroat enough to make it to the top. And I have found that, yes, that can be true if that is the road that you want to go down. But I have also found that having principles and treating people fairly, no matter what their status is, making hard decisions that potentially could lose you money, but because of your principles, you just stand your ground. There does come a certain respect that I think you don't really get if you're just a joke.
Hmm.
So I have found that there is unexpected power in some of the things that I once considered weaknesses of mine, including things like my anxiety and my nervousness or my soft-spokenness or the slow cadence that I speak in. I have found that it actually has helped me in my career, and I hope if anybody is, I constantly say this to students that I think a lot of times the university setting can glorify a certain type of personality more than others. Things like speech class, which like you don't get extra points for giving a speech with like shaky voice and sweaty palms and barely making through your speech. But I honestly have found that because that is how I give speeches, and I have found that it helps me. It shows the person that I'm giving the speech to that I'm a human being, that I am vulnerable, and sometimes they are rooting for me because of my vulnerabilities. And so I just would I always make a point to tell students not to be too scared of the things that they think are their weaknesses, because it might turn around.
I think that's actually brilliant, and you've kind of owned the issues that you think, yeah, as you said, were weaknesses, and I think people respect you and trust you as a result of it. You kind of stuck to your guns also in Australia. We're going to get to the Marvel movie. Those of you who are watching this, you think, are we ever going to get to the Marvel movie? Yes, we are. So even when you were in Australia shooting that, you kind of set some boundaries, right? Some family boundaries. You had a child when you were over there. You quarantined yourself when you thought you were exposed to COVID. And I think what you told me was that, yeah, people actually respected you for just kind of putting a fence around your family there.
Yeah, there was it was a bit hairy when COVID was coming out, because every production was trying to push themselves as far as they could before shutting down, because it's a lot of money on the line if you shut down. And it wasn't a popular choice. There as soon as somebody, especially somebody like the director or one of the producers, goes and gets tested, it apparently becomes national news, or at least in the industry. And which, I mean, I didn't really know that was what was going to happen, but I did know that I had heard enough people in our crew around us who had brushed or come in contact with people who had tested positive. So at that time, even though it wasn't popular, I said I'm going to go get tested, and I did, because I had a newborn at home and I had to. That then the next morning I was in the trades in the Hollywood Reporter, and it turned into like a weird thing where everybody thought I had COVID, but I didn't. I just went and got tested, and then we eventually did the responsible thing and shut the production down. And yes, it was like, I guess it was like maybe, I don't know, at another time, I honestly didn't think about it. At another time, my people pleasing side of me probably would have been scared to step out of line and do that, but it honestly was the right thing to do, and everybody was on board as soon as I did. So,
Oh, that's great.
but for a little while there, I did become the face of Marvel's reaction to COVID, which was strange.
Well, yeah, since you love the limelight so much. Yeah, and so this Marvel Comics movie, all right, I'm looking at the characters and things that you've done other movies about. Are there any similarities between movies that you've made in the past and this Marvel movie with this main character? Anything that you personally can relate to? Maybe the Asian thing, but I'm just thinking, was there something about this character that you were drawn to?
First Asian American superhero in the MCU was definitely the most, and one of the biggest enticing things. A funny story was like, before, literally 2 weeks or so before the Marvel announced that they were looking for a director for this property, I had called my agent and I said, don't ever let me do a Marvel movie. And it was, I had just heard enough stories about the stress of doing those kinds of big movies, and I was just like, I just don't even want to go down that route. And then this announcement came out 2 weeks later, so I had to call my agent again and say, hey, can I take that back, and can you get me a meeting? It was just, it's a strange thing, because it's not even something I honestly, growing up in Hawaii, I don't really think about race or ethnicity or identity, and even when I went to California, it took me a long time to process through what that culture clash was like coming to California. And like, at the time, like people, there were multiple times where people would just, assume I could do Kung Fu, or literally just call me Bruce Lee as a joke. And at the time, it was nothing to me. I just laughed and whatever. But it did, in looking back in retrospect at some of the psychological repercussions of being in Hawaii, where I felt like everybody else, and then moving to California, where all of a sudden I didn't. It was something that I happened to have been processing quite a bit at the time that this Marvel announcement was made. And I just thought, if I could at least be a part of the conversation of what this superhero could be for a new generation of kids, that would be something that's worth at least trying for. So I went in for a meeting, and then I could tell you that story, but it's a long one. But meeting turned into 2 and 3 and 4, and eventually I got the job.
Well, from what I read, Destin, one of the reasons you got the job was that you were able to tell the studio about offensive Asian stereotypes, just like what you were just now describing. So that must have struck a chord with them.
Yeah, I mean, something did. I mean, what I honestly, when I went in to talk to the studio, this was an exercise in the very thing that I was talking about before, of I felt myself trying to figure out how to pitch something that Marvel would like. And I was actually editing Just Mercy at the time and trying to prep on the weekends for this pitch. And I prepped for a full week. I was supposed to have a pitch on Wednesday. And on that Tuesday, everything that I was trying to do, I was writing an idea, deleting it, writing an idea, deleting it. And it came to Tuesday and just nothing felt right. So I called my agent and I said to just cancel the pitch. I just don't have anything. I can't do it.
Oh, wow.
And then this was already, I had gone in and met with them a few times. So this was like, it was at the point where they said, we want to hear your pitch. And so I canceled that one, and my agent came back to me and said, they're giving you another week, and I don't think you should cancel it because it's down to you and two other people. And I was like, what? I haven't even pitched anything. What are you like? And I'd come to find out the Marvel process is just a lot of conversations, which I had done. I'd gone in 3 different times just to talk, and it wasn't pitching. It was just conversations about what it could be. So the next week, I just figured, well, I already canceled it once, so I could just act like it's not going to happen, and I can pitch them anything. I'll just pitch them exactly what I want to do, even though I feel like it's potentially not what a big studio would want. And that I turned the process of making that pitch into something that was extremely beneficial to me. It was a chance to process through a lot of things that I hadn't thought about in a while, and do it through this pitch that I presented to them that was very personal and very emotional, which I presented to them in my shaky, nervous voice and my sweaty palms and my long pauses. I even made the mistake of, they asked me at the end of the pitch, have you ever, like, is this something you've always wanted to do? Have you always wanted to make a Marvel movie? And I made the mistake, but at this point I was like, I don't know what was wrong with me, but I was like, I just didn't give a rip about anything, apparently. I mean, I did. I was like very nice, but so I told them the story about how I told my agent that I never wanted to do a Marvel movie. And I told them that story in my pitch.
Wow.
Which is, I would not recommend that part.
Yeah.
But maybe I would, I don't know. But that was the thing that I was kicking myself about when I was going down the elevator. Man, you're such an idiot. Come to find out, like, later when, so, you know, time goes by and then they call me back in and they tell me I have the job, and one of the 3 heads of Marvel, I mean, they're all such wonderful people. One of them told me that when I told him that was when I told him that I told my agent I never wanted to do a Marvel movie. He said, that's when I knew you were perfect for this job.
That's our guy. Oh, that's awesome. So really the lesson there, it was sort of an anti-pitch. So yeah. I
mean, it's I will say this, like, my pitch was a pitch. I'll say, like, that it doesn't, like, to me, content is all that matters. If somebody has a good idea and they come into me, which now I am privileged to be on the other side of the decision-making desk sometimes, and if someone can come in and pitch an idea and I can see through the nervousness and the awkwardness and the stuttering voice, and I see an idea that I like, I root for that person even more because of their awkwardness.
Yeah.
But so I'm definitely not saying that you can just go in unprepared and stumble your way through and you'll get a job. But I am saying that your personality is like, you don't feel like you need to transform into something other than who you naturally are.
Oh, that's great. And then, as I recall, you were introduced at Comic-Con. That must have been kind of a heady experience. Although before you address whether it was a heady experience or not, I have to ask you, what was a bigger honor, being honored at Comic-Con or being part of the Writers' Symposium by the Sea in 2015? Which of those two things probably got you a little further down the road professionally?
Probably the Writers' Symposium was personally a bigger deal to me.
There it is. There it is.
Well, because I used to go to those all the time when I was at Point Loma. I'm not just blowing smoke. That was like a crazy deal for me to be sitting on the stage instead of like the quiet, shy kid in the audience watching those interviews happen. That was very cool.
Well, I wasn't, I wasn't fishing for it, but oh my God, that is going to be part of our publicity. In fact, I'm writing it right now. This was bigger than Comic-Con. I'm writing that publicity right now, and I'm quoting you. Okay, so bring us up to date on the family. What can you tell us about your kids and your wife? We want to know how the rest of your world goes.
My wife and two boys now. My wife Nikki, and I have my older son is a little over 3. His name's Tomio, and our youngest is turning 1 in a couple weeks, and his name is Aiko. They're great.
Awesome. And they adjusted to life in Australia without any trouble?
Yeah, I mean, it was an adjustment for everybody, but we all generally loved it. It's always kind of weird being trying to be a family when you're not settled and you're constantly moving, but there is an excitement to that as well.
Yeah. So I think Kendall has some questions for us from the audience, but let me just ask you one final thing. As you look back, you've already mentioned a couple of things about your experience at Point Loma, but just how do you characterize now, several years later, the experience of Point Loma and how you would describe it and how you reflect on it?
I mean, for me, the community at Point Loma is what has continued to carry me through my life to this point, and my career. It's also, particularly in the arts, it's something that I don't fully know the answer to, but Point Loma does put out some very interesting artists, a lot of whom I continue to work with or am friends with, and I mean, it does make sense. You spend 4 years contemplating life and philosophy and religion, and you are challenged with your belief system from the time that you were a kid, and you're I think in a very healthy way challenged to revisit things, rethink things, and redefine what you believe in the context of a much more complicated world than perhaps, at least in my case, I thought existed when I was younger. And I think it has been my hub of my community of friends that I continue to live alongside up to this day. So I'm very grateful for that.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, we're proud of you, and everything that that happens and has happened, we just applaud you, and we're just excited for your success, man.
Thank you.
Kendall, what do you want? Do we have some questions from viewers?
I have been furiously collecting questions. We've got quite a few questions for you. So I've tried to combine some of them together. Dean, unfortunately, most of them are for Destin. I apologize.
I can live with that.
Okay. Destin, I think I'll start out more general. The question came about what's your advice for future filmmakers? I know you talked about really working through your vulnerabilities of anxiety and being, as truthful to yourself as you can, but is there something that you would like to kind of share with our future filmmakers who might be on the call today?
I mean, I would, it'll be a little bit repeating what I've talked about, but I do think that it's important, particularly at the stage when you're leaving college, to define for yourself what success means. I mean, even now, like when Dean congratulated me on my success, I'm assuming he's talking about my family. Because I do think that if you are trying to climb any ladder, whatever ladder that is, it can be fun if you just think of it as a game that you. But if you put all of your self-worth in something like that, like making it in the biz or whatever you want to call it, I think it can be pretty detrimental. And I get really sad when I have former students. I used to teach at a high school, film and video at a high school, and when I have former students who call themselves failures because their movie didn't get into Sundance, or their movie didn't get picked up for distribution, and the definition of success for me, as I've reiterated over and over, has always, for me, always come back down to my own personal growth, and how a particular experience can contribute to that personal growth. And so whether or not we even finished The Glass Castle or Just Mercy or the movie I'm working on now, whether or not it wins awards, or whether people watch it or like it, or if it just gets shelved and nobody sees it, the experience of making that movie and telling that story has already enriched my life enough to make it worth it. So that's how I do it, and I would. I think at that stage of leaving college, it's very easy to start feeling like a failure once you're like, oh, I'm not getting responses to my application, or I'm not. I went through all of that, and I think it's very helpful to try to do that personal reflection of what your self-worth is really attached to.
in the kind of taking this a step further from personal to professional, there's a question that came in about how you talk about you identifying with the stories that you tell. Something interesting that I read is that you, even in your earlier films, like I'm Not a Hipster, use actual people's names of your friends and family to relate, you know, who those people were and small nuances about them. But this specific question comes about telling a Marvel story and how that kind of changes a little bit. You're not in complete control, perhaps, of where the story is headed in the Marvel universe. So the question specifically is, in telling a Marvel story, how do you balance the focus on the superhuman strength of a character while also giving space for the faults or the flaws without making vulnerability seem like a bad thing?
You'll have to see the movie to see how we do that in this one. But it's a great, it is a great question, and that is you know, the idea of the superhero, I think has a lot of great inspirational benefits, but I do think that there is a way to redefine what, you know, what the superhero is emotionally, and I 100% believe that vulnerability is a superpower. It is not a weakness. So hopefully some of that comes through in our movie. Amazing.
Awesome. Another question along the Marvel, most of these questions are about your current film, Destin. They're wondering about the switch from, you know, making short films to a Marvel movie. You know, how did that change? How do you have to change your tone on set, or the process or the approach to making a Marvel movie versus some of your other movies that you've worked on? How did that change happen within you, and how did you bring, you know, maybe your foundations of filmmaking into this larger space?
I wish I knew this when I started working on the Marvel movie, but in terms of the process, it's not different at all. I wish I didn't psych myself out, because I actually put myself through a lot of anxiety going into this movie, feeling like there's no way I could be prepared to do it. It was too big. I'm gonna disappoint every Asian American in the country. But I found, like I always do once I started shooting the movie, that it all, in terms of my job, it all comes down to looking in that rectangle box and making sure that what I see resonates with me, and just doing that over and over and over. And once I got started, it honestly became one of the most fulfilling creative experiences I've ever had, and continues to be. I have never worked with a more supportive, open-minded, and risk-taking studio before, and the people have just been really amazing. So it's been a very positive experience for me.
You mentioned not wanting to disappoint Asian Americans. I can imagine working through Just Mercy as well as this new film. I heard an interview where you talked about even the diversity of the people on set that you're working with, and how you're happy to see, be a part of a change in an industry where you're getting to see a more diverse population working alongside of you. How do you feel that you directing this movie is going to make impact for future generations of Asian Americans, and just, again, diversifying the pool in Hollywood?
If this movie is like the last one, then we won't have changed anything. But I do hope that it is one of many more to come as our stories continue to push to reflect the world as opposed to just one subset of the world. Hollywood, just like any industry, like diversifying any industry requires a certain amount of risk taking, because at least in our industry, a lot of people who are minorities were just not ever given the chance. So they have consistently been working at this level. And when you do a movie like a big studio movie like this, it's easy to make the excuse that, our production designer, Sue Chan, hadn't production designed like a big movie, but she's art directed some bigger movies, and she's been working in the industry forever. We asked around, and she had an amazing reputation as an art director, which is one step under a production designer. And it did require Marvel to take a risk to say, let's give her a shot, and she killed it. She was like, she was so ready for that challenge and just took it with such ease and grace and humor. And now now she can get any big movie she wants. Like, as soon as we finished, I had 3 different producers and directors calling me about her. So the more that happens, the more people are able to give people the first shot, then hopefully the diversifying continues to grow. I hope.
Absolutely. Speaking of your first shot, who are the people in the industry that your dream people to work with? Who's someone, I know you've worked a lot with Brie Larson, that came up as a question of why you continue to work with Brie Larson and what draws you to working with her. But then secondarily to that, who are some of the people that you look forward to in the future getting to work alongside?
Brie, when we did Short Term 12, the first meeting, real face-to-face meeting I had with her was incredibly awkward. We went through the script together, and there was just a lot of silence, and we left, and I was thinking, she hates me, she hates this project, she's gonna quit. Come to find out, she left thinking the same thing. And we were both just really scared. We were both scared of disappointing the other person, of being found out as of being a fraud or what. And I think through the experience of working on that movie together, it was Brie's first time. It was my first, it was my second feature, but really my first feature with a budget and producers, and the experience of going through that together is Brie's first time starring in a feature. We just became good friends, and I think grew up together, along with our whole crew. So I'm excited to work with, I don't know, whoever. I don't have any specific people in my head that I'm excited to work with. But I like working with new people, but I really like working with old people and the same people that I trust. I really enjoy getting back together and making stuff. So Brie is one of those people, and along the way I've picked up a really wonderful family / crew of people that I would love to continue to work on things together. And even this Marvel movie, we my sister's on it. My editor Nat, who worked on Short Term 12, is on it. Joel P. West, who's a PLNU grad, is doing the music for it. I love continuing to work on projects with the people that I love.
I was going to ask you about Joel P. West. Did you two know each other while you were here at Point Loma? How did that creative relationship develop over time?
I didn't know him. I didn't really. Yeah, I'm not even sure if I didn't know him when I was there. He was on campus, and he was like, he had dreadlocks and he didn't wear shoes. So I remember him, and he always had a guitar. After I graduated, I would come back on campus. That's when Joel started becoming a bit more of a legend through music, and he'd perform at Musafi or the cafe downstairs, and I just really liked his music, but I wasn't really friends with him at that time. But then we roomed together with Brad Kester and Andrew Glendenning after he graduated. I was lived with them in South Park, and that was the first project we did. My first hired paid gig was a project for the Learning Channel. It was a documentary about 3 different people who were born without arms. And Joel, that was my first time. I asked Joel, he'd never scored anything before, but I really loved his music. I always thought it was very cinematic. So I asked him if he'd consider scoring this project, and he was like, he agreed to. And he didn't even know how to read music at the time, but he just like, okay, I better learn how to read music. So he started teaching himself how to read music and write scores. And I convinced the producers that I found this amazing composer. And I didn't tell him that he was my roommate. And he got hired, and that was the first project that we did together. And he's scored everything I've done since. And now he's scoring a Marvel movie. It's crazy.
Wow. It sounds like you are a part of the cycle of bringing up new people into the industry, and that's exciting. It's exciting to hear that you are going back to your roots and helping the people that have made an impact on your life get a shot at it too. You're paying it forward.
Thanks.
The last question I'm going to ask here as we wrap up is, what's next? What is there to look forward to in the days ahead for you, personally and professionally?
Right now, I'm really looking forward to going home and hanging out with my boys and taking them to the beach this weekend somewhere. I don't know. I've never had like the big pie in the sky long-term goals. Right now, I definitely have an immediate goal of continuing to try to find a balance between family and work. I do think that both are psychologically important to me, and I think it's important to my kids to have a dad who likes what he does or is passionate about it. But I also definitely want to have time with my kids. So I feel very privileged to be at a place in my career where I'm not as worried about what the next thing is. and I can be a little more focused on the thing that I'm working on. But I also, my producing partner and I have some exciting things that we are developing at the moment, all of which are very much in line with the things that I believe in, the hope of putting something positive into the world. So I am excited about the future.
Well, that's inspirational to me. I think everyone seeks to find balance in life, and for you to emulate that for us here tonight, Destin, again, it reminds us that the reason that we get to celebrate people like you is not because of the accolades or acclaims that you receive, but because of the person that you are. And we are really grateful for you and proud to call you a Point Loma alum. So can we silently thank, I wish you could all unmute. Destin, imagine the sound that you heard at the Comic-Con and just double that. That is what you're hearing from your Point Loma community. We're so grateful. Dean, thank you so much for moderating this event today. We appreciate the way that you lead us through storytelling and conversation in that way.
Happy to do it, and always happy to hang out with Destin. So this was a win for me. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, that is the end of our time together, unfortunately, this evening. However, we do invite you to come back tomorrow night. We have a film premiere of our own with director Jared Callahan, who Jared tells me actually met with Destin and got inspiration from him early on in this film. So we invite you to join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. for a film premiere with Jared Callahan. It's going to be a great evening together. So thank you all for being here. Destin, again, what a true honor to get to speak with you. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Kendall, and thanks everyone. Thanks, Dean. You all are the best.
Good to see you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great night.